and welcome, welcome, welcome. Hope you're having a great and wonderful day. This is Daring Dialogues, and I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. Again, I hope that you're having a great and wonderful day. Tonight is our Finance Friday and Healthy, Wealthy, Wise Friday. And so far, we have been talking about the whiteness of wealth, how the tax system impoverishes Black Americans, and how we can fix it. And we're also been reading from Tiffany Alice's book, Getting Good with Money. So these are our two subject matters on this evening. We are live broadcasting through our YouTube channel as well as our podcast, anchor.fm/Daring Dialogues. So for those who are not on social media, if they choose to listen via our podcast, this recording is there as well. So let's jump right in. We've got about a good 45 minutes and let's dive in. We are still in the introduction section of The Whiteness of Wealth. I highly recommend people get this book. If you are an audio person, I do believe it is available by audio as well. And it's called The Whiteness of Wealth by Dorothy A. Brown. We are still in the introduction, so let's get started. Today, we can talk about the Black-white wealth gap, but what we have to say isn't pretty. According to a Pew Research Center analysis in 2016, the median wealth of white households was 171,000 compared with 17,100 for Black households and 20,600 for Latinx households. Asians and other racial groups are not identified in the survey of Consumer Finance's database that was used for the Pew analysis. White Americans have 10 times the median wealth of Black Americans and 8 times that of Latinx. That does not mean that all white households have wealth or that no Black or Latinx households have wealth. In fact, just under 16% of whites have zero or negative wealth, meaning they owe more than they own. But compare that with 37% of Blacks and 33% of Latinx families who are in the same position. White families are equally likely to have zero wealth as they are to be millionaires. Black families, on the other hand, are 20 times more likely to have zero or negative wealth than to be millionaires, and Latin families are 14 times more likely. Despite these data, survey results show that most Americans, whites and Blacks, overestimate economic racial equality, with the worst offenders being higher income whites. In other words, most Americans think that the Black-white wealth gap is small. For white Americans, it is easier to believe that things are better than they really are because it allows them to think that there isn't much work left to be done while still remaining ignorant of their privilege and how the system is rigged in their favor. For Black Americans, it is easier to overestimate our progress because the alternative is to realize that even after doing everything right, we fall further and further behind. Today, the Black-white wealth gap only continues to grow. Between 1983 and 2016, median white family wealth increased by $1,000 annually, compared with only a $66 increase for the median Latinx wealth. Sadly, Black families saw their wealth decrease by $83 annually. Even college educated Black-holes saw their wealth decrease during a smaller time period, from 1989 to 2013, as their white peers' wealth rose. There is no end in sight. So, why is this gap so persistent and why is it widening? Well, if you ask the political right, it's because Black Americans just don't make the right choices or they don't work hard enough. According to a 2016 General Social Survey, the majority of white Republicans, 55%, agreed with the statement that Black Americans are worse off economically because most just don't have the motivation or willpower to pull themselves out of poverty, compared with 26% of white Democrats. 42% of white Republicans thought Black Americans were lazier than white Americans, and 26% rated Black Americans as less intelligent. Just look at the election of President Barack Obama. The conservative commentator Bill Bennett said Obama's election meant there was no need to take any excuses from people who claimed the deck was stacked against Black Americans succeeding. The title of a 2018 Newsweek article about a meeting between President Trump and members of the CBC summed up this attitude and its inaccuracy. Trump thinks only Black people are on welfare, but really, white Americans receive the most benefits. The political left, which does admit to our racist history, does not do much better when it comes to understanding the situation. The left wing narrative tends to center on blatant race discrimination by bad actors in the past. The FHA denying home loans to Black Americans in the 50s and 60s, subprime lenders targeting Black Americans during the Great Recession. This past discrimination has led to a disproportionate percentage of Black Americans, 21%, living in poverty compared to white Americans at 8%. The economic gap has grown worse over time, the argument goes, simply because wealth begets more wealth and Black Americans are starting from behind. But remember that the GSS American Value Survey statistic I just gave you said 26% of white Democrats also believe that Black Americans are to blame for their relative poverty. The same survey showed that almost 1 in 4 Democrats, 24%, thought Black Americans were lazier than white Americans. For Black Americans, racism isn't just a part of our history, it's a part of our present. The wealth gap isn't growing only because of the disproportionate percentage of Black Americans in poverty. It's growing because whiteness has consistently and continually played a serious role in wealth building. Think a college education is an equalizer? Research shows that Black households headed by a college graduate have less wealth than white households headed by a high school dropout. If you want the number on that, household headed by a college graduate, $23,400. Average white household headed by a high school dropout, $34,700. Think all the high school dropouts struggle? A white high school dropout has more than 20 times the wealth of a Black high school dropout. White families with an employed head of household have 10 times the wealth of Black families who do. All of this inequity is related to tax policy and always has been, even at the beginning of our modern system when Black Americans were invisible beneficiaries. Today, Black Americans of all income levels are equally invisible when it comes to shaping policy, but are paying more in taxes than their white peers because our tax laws were designed with white Americans in mind. That's why no solution proposed by either the right or the left, not better jobs, not increased home ownership, and not more access to higher education, will be effective without a significant and fundamental tax reform itself. In general, our tax policies ignore the day to day reality of most Black Americans who are still playing catch up in a system that deliberately excluded them for centuries. Can Black Americans now purchase homes? Yes. Happy homeowner here. But as we'll see in the next chapter, if we buy in neighborhoods with lots of Black neighbors, we lose financially when compared with our white peers. Can Black Americans attend elite colleges? Yes, but our families have generally not accumulated enough wealth to pay for tuition and be eligible for the tax breaks for higher education available to families of our white peers. More on that in Chapter 3. And it goes on and on as Black Americans find jobs, plan for retirement, and work to leave a legacy for the next generation. Which brings me back to the couple who started it all for me. My parents, James and Dottie Brown. I was right. They had paid too much in taxes. But it wasn't because there are separate rate tables for Black and white Americans. That would be against the law. Black taxpayers like my parents pay more because U.S. tax policies ignore the reality of societal differences based on race. The joint tax return exists because back in 1930, a wealthy white shipbuilder named Henry Seaborn convinced the Supreme Court to impute half of his taxable income to his stay at home wife, Charlotte, lowering his taxes. Congress gave all Americans access to the joint return in 1948. The policy rewarded people like the Seaborns, allowing a couple who could easily get by with one income to split it down the middle to avoid being taxed at the highest rate. But that same policy punished the Browns, who were striving to save and build a better future for themselves and children and needed every single penny of their two paychecks to do so. It is a pattern that has shaped the contour of being middle class and Black, and it helps explain why Black families have such a hard time maintaining middle class status across decades and generations. Unfortunately, even in the 21st century, that pattern remains, and Black families who achieve financial stability are far more likely to lose it than their white peers, as reported in a 2015 study called Five Bleak Facts on Black Opportunity. A March 2018 intergenerational mobility study showed that Black children had the most difficult time achieving upward mobility when compared with white, Latinx, and Asian children. Black children of parents in the top income quintile are about as likely to fall to the bottom as they are to remain at the top. Compare that with white children of parents in the top income quintile who are almost 5 times as likely to remain at the top than they are to ever fall to the bottom. Tax policy by taking money out of the pockets of Black parents while putting money into the white pockets can help explain why Black children have a harder time remaining in the middle class as adults. Solving the mystery of my parents' income taxes did not lead me to a revolutionary discovery. Instead, it reinforced a truth I and most successful Black Americans know. Our families found a way to work around a system designed to support white wealth building. Individual Black Americans excel in spite of the roadblocks to building wealth. Individual white Americans struggle in spite of their systemic advantages. And anti Black racism doesn't exist only in the past federal, state, or local governments. It is perpetuated every day by white Americans, many of whom consider themselves progressive. They are white parents selecting where their children go to school. They are chief executive officers and board members of large private corporations who are comfortable with very few Black Americans as executives or upwardly mobile employees, who do not commit real resources to the recruitment and retention of a diverse workforce or ensuring that equally credentialed Black workers are as likely to receive the same opportunities and compensation as their peers. They are white homeowners who choose to purchase homes in homogeneous white neighborhoods, even though they would deny being uncomfortable living next door to, quote, too many Blacks. Until white Americans change their behavior, the Black-white wealth gap will continue to expand. The marriage penalty that started this journey for me is just one example of many tax policies that have a disparate impact by race. Not every policy will impact every Black family negatively, and not every disparity can be fixed by adjusting the law. We can change the way married couples are taxed, for example, but we also need to look at why it often takes 2 Black people working in a household to match the salary of one white worker. Until anti Black racism is eliminated, Tax reforms will need to factor in societal racism. Just as an annual tax refund invested through the years can add up to true wealth building opportunity, many of our tax policies over time and without race conscious reforms are pushing black families down while consistently pulling white families up. So, we're still in the introduction, but a little bit more food for thought. I can tell you about what's happening right now in my own community. And I remember when we moved here, it was predominantly Jewish and white. I think there was maybe one or two other families in a 60, I would say a 60 family housing community. And since we have moved in, I would say in the last 2 years, we've added 3 or 4 more black families. And in the last year, like right after, I would probably say maybe July, August of this year, so like a year after that, we've had 10 white families to move out. 10. And so, what does that do to your property value? What does that do to your neighborhood? Well, right now, there's still enough white families here that our property value is continuing to go up. However, if the demographics change of the next people who move in to fill those homes, we may actually see our property value go down. Right now, it's doing really well. It's going up. But that's also some other things that are affecting that is our companies, our stores moving into your community. For us, they are. It's a good thing. But again, I often joke with people about how do you know whether or not you live in a white community or how do you know you live in a diverse community? And I said there are 2 stores that can almost guarantee you that your community is considered diverse enough to hold these 2 stores because of the income that's coming in. And that is Chick-fil-A and Starbucks. Where you see a Chick-fil-A and a Starbucks, you know that the demographics of that community is probably largely white and probably conservative. Now, if somebody wants to debate that, send me data otherwise. But that is what I consistently see. So if the demographics of the community is majority white or conservative, you will more than likely see a Starbucks nearby. And where you see a Starbucks, you typically will see a Chick-fil-A. It might be in the same plaza. It might be, a little bit, down the road, less than a mile down the road from the Starbucks. But you will see those 2 anchor companies in a neighborhood. So to me, that's just a visual marker. And I want you to think about it. What kinds of stores are in your community, are in your neighborhood? Is it lots of rent to own things? Is it vape shops? Is it payday organizations? What is actually forming the stores or the economic driver? What's the economic driver inside of your community? Just something to think about. We're going to go on to the next book, which is Get Good with Money. And we are talking about getting to know financial wholeness tonight. And Tiffany points out some things about your mindset. And I'm going to try to read through at least 3 of these that she covers about developing a money mindset. Number 1, recognize your money influences and patterns and identify their consequences. So much of our mindset towards money, what constitutes appropriate spending or saving, for instance, isn't solely our own. Instead, it often comes from our past in direct and subtle ways. When it comes to direct imprinting, a lot of people take their childhood messaging to heart. If your parents suffered hard financial times and were vocal about it, you might now hold tight to your money out of fear of the same fate. Sometimes what we learn encourages us to do the opposite of what we witnessed. So if your parents may be oversaved and scrimped on your school clothes, even when you knew they had money, you might now be an overspender out of spite without even realizing it. Excuse me. Or if they were overspenders in a way that embarrassed you, you might now be really, really frugal to make a kind of statement. Families aren't the only place we get our messages about money. Society also influences our financial mindset. From an early age, we are bombarded with messages about what matters. Advertising, Advertisements do this blatantly, right? They try to make us feel something in relation to the thing being sold. Whether we're aware of it or not, we internalize those messages about status and power and happiness, and that sometimes changes our behavior in unhappy ways. After all, the new shoes might make you walk tall and feel confident, but the credit card bill might hurt. There are also more subtle ways we digest messages we hear and see in pop culture. Messages about respect, love, influence, and connection. Specifically, that having money leads to all these things. Now, there's a verse that some people like to quote, and that is money answers all things. But the greater question that I want people to think about who use that is to ask yourself, but is it the right answer? Yes, money answers all things, but is it the right answer? It doesn't say it's the right answer, it just says it is an answer, right? Think, for example, about the way female friendships are often depicted on TV or in movies, and you'll notice when the going gets tough, the girlfriends go shopping. I'm not saying that shopping together is not a way to stay connected, but it's also a way to stay connected to your credit card bill. And surely there are less costly, even more meaningful ways to recreate that connection. As a matter of fact, there is a series on Netflix right now. It's a Nigerian based film television series called The Smart Money Women. Um, I watched the whole series through and I thought it was very interesting because it was a dramatic storyline about girlfriends and things they were going through, but it also tied in financial money lessons all throughout each segment of the series. So they were actually like teaching within the entertainment, which I thought was very good. And you don't often see that in television series. They put in a lesson about things like credit cards, overspending, investments, living trusts and wills, and it ran all throughout the series. So if you're interested, check that series out. The writer says, what I am saying is that a lot of forces can combine to form your money habits and patterns which have consequences. If you have bad habits, the consequences can be extreme. You can ruin relationships, lose your prized possessions, and even struggle to put food on your table. The consequences can also be less obvious. If your habits lead to a really low credit score, for example, you could lose your job opportunity since some companies consider credit scores when hiring. They use it to judge trustworthiness. Now, I don't agree with that for various reasons. Number one, because algorithms these days are the new Jim code. But nevertheless, this is true. Some companies do consider your credit score. These kinds of consequences don't usually happen overnight. Take a moment. The key to breaking any patterns is to gently question your behavior. Think about your consistent financial habits and write them down. Be honest about where they come from, how they make you feel, how they might be pulling you off course from your financial goals. This is not to make yourself feel bad about your current habits, but to acknowledge and be aware. Knowing when, how, and why you do something is the first step to making lasting changes. If you identify any behaviors that are not serving your pursuit of financial wholeness, It is time to let them go. One way to help eliminate unproductive patterns is to start thinking 2 steps ahead. If I do this, then this happens. If I do this, then this happens. You want to get into the habit of hitting pause and asking yourself things like, what would this purchase, change, or financial decision do for me right now? What will it do for me a month from now when the bill for it comes? What will I do when the bill comes and the money that was supposed to go toward one thing has to go toward something else? To answer these questions is not always about the necessary, or it's not always about the current, but it's about, can I make the decision? What if I don't get the funds that's supposed to cover what I'm purchasing right now? It's about thinking 2 steps ahead. The answer to these questions isn't always to not make a purchase or decision, but if you make this thought cycle a part of your spending process, you will always be making thoughtful, better decisions. I think we have time for one more. Number 2, establish your own financial voice and use it to take charge. Now it's time to get connected to your own financial voice. Visualize a new, improved version of yourself. Start to envision yourself as a person who is good with money, which means you have to stop saying, I'm not really good with money. Think about what kind of behaviors this person has. If it helps to work from what you know, draw this new you in your mind using characteristics of people you already respect, who are already known to be good with money. Picture your friend. Picture the person who is actually in the place of financial stability, success. Use that person as a person in your mind if you can't seem to see yourself that way. Begin to envision those voices. Begin to envision that goal. Then start taking the lead. Too many people get stuck thinking that they need to work hard for money instead of realizing that money needs to work hard for them. We're often taught that we have to go to school, work hard for money, and that's just the way life is supposed to be. If you think that way, it is time to shift your relationship with money. It's time to say, money, you're going to work for me now. Money is not the boss of you. You are the boss of money. Seriously, I always say money is like a toddler screaming and shouting that it should be spent on that new thing. But you are the parent. You're the one who can say no. You can say, not this month, you're going to my savings account. Not this month, you're going to my investment account. So take a moment. Envision a version of yourself who is good with money. Envision them making that money and being and working hard. Then envision yourself letting that money do the work for you. When you think of yourself now, that was point number 2. I personally don't use the word boss, but I would say you are the one in control of your money. You're the one in control of your mindset about money as well. So that was our reading on tonight. I'm going to open it up if you want to respond to the reading. We've just read an excerpt from Get Good with Money by Tiffany Aliche. And also we have just read an excerpt of The Whiteness of Wealth by Dorothy A. Brown, dealing with and talking about the tax system and the wealth gap and some reasons why the wealth gap is not closing. Again, if you want to jump on live, take a moment to hit the camera and I will bring you on. This is for those who are on IG. If you're on our YouTube channel, you will be able to hear the conversation from this point. I want to thank those of you who are listening via our podcast. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues. Thank you for your time and attention. Feel free to hit us up in the message. Take care, and until next week, stay safe. All right, it should be adding you in.
Good evening, Pastor Shante.
Good evening.
I just want to say one thing about this book. It took one man to go to the government and say, I want to split my income down the middle with my wife so that we will only be taxed one time. So, but that did not work for Black families.
Right. And the fact that he got that allowance over a decade before everybody else did. To me, that's just a Selah moment.
Yeah.
I want to point out something here that I read earlier today, and it's an article talking about how a Missouri town seized or took control over a Black doctor's home, and his relatives are seeking to reclaim the land. And I want to read this excerpt because to me, it also deals with the wealth building and our ability to hold on to even the wealth that we receive, even the wealth that we get. And it says, what happened to the Venable family, because eventually they did give him a settlement. I think the settlement was like $30,000, but today I think they said it would be like worth $300,000. But at the time it was like a $30,000 settlement, but he never wanted to give up his land. He never wanted to give it up, but they used eminent domain to literally take his land from him. And the article excerpt says, what happened to the Venable family is not an isolated incident. Cities across the country are slowly beginning to reckon with decades-old seizures of land from Black families. So let's say you make it through all of the struggle, right? You save up your money, you go buy land, you're trying to hold on to that land because it is a form of wealth. God is not in our time frame, right? In our age, God is not making more land. So you're trying to hold on to the piece that you have. And they're literally telling you they went after Black families using eminent domain to take their land from them. Eminent domain was used as a means to carry out quote unquote urban renewal, the rehabilitation of city areas by renovating or replacing dilapidated buildings with new housing, public buildings, parks, roadways, and industrial areas, often in accordance with government planning. So in this guy's case, they took his land and turned it into a park. And then on top of that, they named the park after the person who successfully took his land from him. So the only thing they've done recently is rename the park after the person they stole it from. I'm gonna need y'all to do more than that, okay?
So all they're gonna do is change their name and not compensate the family, right? Or give them back their land.
No, not in this case. And so I want to talk about this term because I knew there had to be a term for it. But until I read this article, I didn't realize what it was actually called, because this is actually going on in Baltimore right now, in Maryland. It's going on in other cities, but the term is called slum clearance. Write that down. SLUM, slum clearance. It's the act of deeming neighborhoods and homes blighted and declaring the area substandard. This was a part of the seizure process, according to a University of Richmond study. These were loaded terms oftentimes used to target neighborhoods of color. So they would get a slum clearance by declaring your neighborhood as so tore down, so blighted, so crime ridden that nobody want to live there, or you scared everybody away from living there because of the element of crime, which we know now from another book we read that a lot of times it was hooded white people driving through neighborhoods and doing drive-by shootings.
Exactly.
So that the media worked with that to say, oh my God, this area is crime ridden. Which in turn cycles to nobody wants to live there, go there, move there, build there, which results in blighted neighborhood, which results in we get to use the policy of blighted neighborhood to snatch your homes.
Yeah.
And the cycle continues. So this is what a lot of people are starting to catch on to. That it's all connected. It's tied together. It's a web of property theft. That's what it is.
Yeah. And policies that they design around the fact that, and what you made me, and this what you made me flash back to, the South Bronx, New York, is what they did with that. Called it, what you call the slum clearance. And they cleared out all the people. And guess who? And built in large Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
Moved all those buildings, and when they build around it, you can't go back there to live.
Yeah, because you can't afford to. Because you can't afford to. And I think about one of my family's properties right now in South Florida. People have been trying for decades now to try to steal our family's property because it sits so close to US 1 in a very opportune place. And so we know that is something that we have to consistently keep an eye on, in terms of our family members who are looking over that particular property because of stuff like this. Eminent domain. We feel like we should have your property.
And they have a place. It says Oklahoma called Africa Town. That's what the people who came, struggled, and built all those homes. They took them, got them out, and built a highway through the entire area. And these people now too. I saw that. I think last year they're trying to get some retribution for how their homes were taken, and and then you talk about that they force people out of their homes.
Yep.
Brought people out of their homes, chased people away, and threatened them, like you said, and people packed up and left out of fear, and they just took their land.
And unfortunately, it's still going on. That's what I want people to understand. Like, understand that this is a ongoing game. Because to them, it's a game.
It's a game.
You might just be trying to live, survive, thrive where you are. You're finally like, yes, I've got a piece of property. But now you have to watch out for this kind of stuff. And like I said earlier in the broadcast, in terms of our property value going up, and it's doing really well. Almost every day in the mail right now, we getting notices about let us buy your property.
And you said something that's so key too. Chick-fil-A, Starbucks. And pay attention to what's in your area. The other thing that they do when you talk about the slum clearance, area has come up for a certain zone, and we wanted to do this, and they begin to offer people money. So they give him $30,000. They said it should be worth $300,000. And now all we want to do, we know we did wrong, and since y'all caught us, let us just name the property after him.
No. So these are the things we have to think about. And even in terms of, if you're a person that may be listening tonight and you're going through this kind of fight, right? You have to make sure that you follow that thing all the way through. Don't just let someone give you a symbolism of an apology.
Well, that's what they want to do in this country for everything.
I don't want just a symbolism of an apology. I need you to fork over the coin.
Exactly.
Of the value that it should have been, whatever it is.
In the first place.
No more settling for symbolism.
No.
Well, we want to name this place after your ancestor. I mean, we know we owe you money. But we want to have a ceremony. No. We're not doing no ceremony.
All the family.
No.
We want to have a ribbon cut.
No ceremonies until you have cut the family a check. If you haven't done that, why are we having this ceremony?
Yeah. So why are we having a ribbon cut? Because that's what y'all want to do. Now come, we're going to put up the ribbon. We're going to get the big old scissors, and we're going to name this after your ancestor. And y'all should go away and be clapping and very happy. But you have done this for centuries with our ancestors and taking land. And you don't think that we are owed compensation.
It's a mess. I read it through. I did post it. I posted it on Historical African American Images page. Okay. And I also posted it inside of the SALT group. So you can go read the article in full. Okay. But I just read it and I just started seeing red.
Do.
Because this is becoming a common occurrence for how you deal with Black people. And what we don't seem to understand is, if you let them get away with it with you, they're going to come behind that, and anybody else coming behind you, they're going to use that as a pattern and as a precedent for how to respond. That means you're making my fight harder.
Exactly.
Because you settled for symbols. I don't want anybody else to just settle for symbols. That's where I am.
And I'm so tired of this other thing about the blame with the income and we lazy and nobody, everything gets tossed over and back at us. And y'all are the ones, the orchestrator of the reason why we're in this situation. And our ancestors built this nation. You don't think you owe us reparation for the free labor? And then you always throw everything back on people. You know what? Can I just say something just a little bit?
Go ahead.
I want to say, there is a football player. He played for the New York Jets. He complained about this very coach and told them everything about him wasn't right. I was thinking about the blame game. Oh, he just being a baby and a whiner because he not getting the ball. 11 years later, y'all got it all laid out for everything that he told you. So I was just thinking about the blame part of it. Oh, we get the blame if we open up our mouth, is we being whiny babies, or we're not grateful for what you have allowed us, you want to say, to accomplish. So you just should shut up and say nothing. I can't. I know I get emotional, but I can't.
No, I mean, reading about some of these things will make you upset.
Yeah.
It will. When you realize, like she said, I realized not just my parents were cheated through the tax policies, but this is a whole systemic issue that's been going on for decades.
Yes.
It's been going on for decades. If you just tuned in, I'm going to ask you to catch the replay because we are getting ready to sign off. And I want to encourage you to get these two books, Get Good with Money by Tiffany Aliche and The Whiteness of Wealth by Dorothy A. Brown. How? Because we're most of us, if you're in business, you're already collecting your receipts for next year. Okay.
Uh-huh.
How
Yeah.
the tax system impoverishes Black Americans and how we can fix it.
Yes.
Yeah. And 10 simple steps to becoming financially whole. This has
Yeah.
been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light in your community, be light in your neighborhood. And I'd like to say, no one is coming to save us.
No. Oh.
If you are a believer, yes, your soul is saved.
Yes.
Your spirit
Amen.
is made secure. But when it comes to dealing with the issues of this earth, God gave you something called a brain, and He wants you to use it.
Amen.
So that you can avoid the traps meant to destroy you. Remember, if you live in the United States, this country was not built for us. It was built by us, but not for us. And so you've got to start learning how this country has disadvantaged you so that you can overcome those disadvantages. And as somebody would say, learn how to game the system in a legal way to get back some of the wealth that has been stolen from you and your generations.
Amen.
And you can't do that without applying knowledge.
Amen.
And part of that is learning how you have been disadvantaged. I know people don't want to hear how they've been disadvantaged because, like me, you start reading and you get angry at the many ways that this country has stolen from your ancestors. It makes you upset. I get it. But the purpose of these readings is to learn so that we can make the proper adjustments so that we can have good success going forward for our own families and future generations. So thank you all for your time and attention tonight. Take care, and we'll see you hopefully for Monday Motivation, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care, everybody, and God bless.
God bless.